everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from February 12th, 2021, and I'm recording this on Friday the 13th, 8/13/2021. So as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. This week I think we got 17 books to look at, and we look back at these books to understand what factors made them hot back then, and what factors have continued to either make them go up in price, drop back in price, so that we all make a little better decisions about the books we chase versus the things we're just patient on. I will say this is a very interesting week, in the fact that there's only one book that fell into what I would call my I'll be back, where it's just slightly down. Things either plummeted or kept going. It seemed like this week there was no in between. So let's get into these 17 books and see if we can learn anything. So first up, we have cover number 1. This Brian Michael Bendis series was basically announced that it was going to be working on an animated show for HBO of this, caused Raw Comics to jump to $20 to $25. 9.8 was going for $80. Now Raw Comics are $1 to $15, mostly around $5. So cover basically. 9.8 sale recently went for $30, and that's the only 9.8 sale recently. So this one has dropped way back. This turned into a bit of a trap. So not a lot of news on this one, and as a result, not a lot of continued value here. Next, we have Forever Maps, number 1, another option news book. Basically, this book got optioned, jumped up to $60 book, went from basically $10 book to a $60 book in 24 hours. And now it's a $5 to $15 book, so it's basically a $10 book again. Again, only one 9.8 sale, also for around $30, so that was interesting. But this one, I called this one a trap, and this one wasn't even a trap. This was a dumpster fire. This was not good if you spent $60 for this thing. Clearly a bad decision, one that would have been worth being patient on. So next, we have our last kind of option news book of the week, and that is A Voice in the Dark, number 1. This was actually originally optioned way back in 2014. This basically hit the list because there was news that a script was finished for a pilot. Jumped it to a $15 book on average, but there were sales as high as $70. So yeah, big range. And now this is a $1 to $8 book. So this is kind of another dumpster fire. It's an under $10 book. So definitely not one that was worth chasing back then. We'll see if anything actually ever comes of it. Been a very slow movement on this one since it got optioned. Now, the cat is talking to all of you. Next, our only cover of the week, and that is Taskmaster number 3, the Davis 1 in 25. This is the Black Widow Taskmaster cover. Plus, there's a first appearance of like a new South Korean character, hero. Back then, raw copies were going for $60 to $75. Now, raw copies are going for $200 to $300. I called this and I'll be back. I didn't particularly like this cover. I supposedly like his reflection in her suit, but yet it goes through the mesh part, and it just, like, for me, I don't know, it just didn't work for me. But apparently the comic buying community loves this cover because this thing is way up. Like I said, $200 to $300 for raw copies. Now there's only been like 3 sales of that since like the beginning of June, but definitely this book is going for big money. Next, we have our recall of the week. We actually had a recall this week. We get those every so often. This is Immortal Hulk number 43. This was recalled because basically there was some controversy. They had a scene in a jewelry store, and they put the Star David on the jewelry store window, which people felt like was kind of like Jewish people owning a jewelry store is a little bit of a stereotype that they. So anyway, there was some controversy over this. Back then, it got recalled. Raw copies were going for $20 to $55 back then. Called this a trap. This turned into a trap. They're now $5 to $15. You could almost call this a dumpster fire, really. 9.8s are going for have been selling for around $75, but not very many sales. So this one definitely came crashing down. The cat is very much wanting attention at the moment. Next, we have Uncanny X-Men, number 266. The second appearance of Gambit. Okay. So, figured I would just, throw that out there. The first full appearance, I don't know what they've decided on these 2 books. Anyway, this is the one where he's on the cover. This is the one everybody wants. 9.8s back then were hitting $750 to $775. Now they're going for $1,200 for 9.8. Raw copies are going for $100 to $300 depending on condition. I put this as an I'll be back. I thought there might be like a little lull. There wasn't necessarily news related around Gambit, just people specking on all these X characters. But these X books have just kept going. All of these X-Men first appearances have just had high value this year. People have been chasing them. People have been wanting them, trying to lock them up. So this has been straight cash, and it's continued to climb. Speaking of straight cash, our next book is Something is Killing the Children, #1. The A cover. This series has been super hot. We've talked about a bunch of these books over the last year or so. Back then, 9.8s were hitting $500, which is big money for a recent series like this. Now they're $1,100 to $1,300 for 9.8s of this book. Raw copies will cost you $400 to $700 of this A cover. I said this book was straight cash. This book has continued to be straight cash and just keeps going. We know there's supposedly a series coming. We know there's a spin-off comic series coming. This has just been super hot, and we'll see where it goes. Next, we have Batman #96. This was on the list last week. This is the first appearance of Clown Hunter. This was related to spec that this character might actually be the new Red X that they were putting forward in Future State. This is the Jimenez 1 in 25, mind you, that he's on the cover of. Raw copies back then were 80 to 100, which is up from about 50 last week. Last week, 9.8s were 125. This week, they were at 225 to 250. Whereas it had been pretty steady when I talked about it last week to maybe slightly down, and I'll be back. Now raw copies 30 to 50, 9.8s 90 to 140. So this has actually turned into a bit of a trap from the actual peak. If you got in on the front side of when it was getting hot, it's still about that value. But if you waited till it was really going, you definitely overspent at this stage for this character. Still no word on who Red X is, so we'll see. I guess this is still a possibility, although I don't think people are betting this anymore. But we'll see. Next, we got Micronauts #8, the first appearance of Captain Universe. Raw copies back then were going for $65. 9.8s were hitting $500 because there was spec that Captain Universe was going to tie in some way to the King in Black stuff. I have no idea if it did or not. I didn't read all that stuff, but now it's going for 10 to 30. 9.8s are going for 300 to 400, so it's come down. Definitely a bit of a trap, but not a huge one. It was a borderline I'll be back trap is what I put this on. But yeah, definitely I don't think there was much payoff here, but it's actually sustained value better than I thought it would, given that I don't think there was a lot of payoff for this. Next, we're going to be moving out of Comic Buzz into Disney Plus and MCU related stuff. That's basically the rest of the list. First up, we have Young Avengers #10. First appearance of Tommy Shepard, but also the first cover of Kate Bishop, which is probably a factor I should have factored in when I was making my predictions on this, and I didn't. It hit because Tommy Shepard and WandaVision was going on, and Tommy was appearing in the show. Raw copies were going for $65. 9.8s were $250. I thought, I'll be back. The show goes away. He'll be a pause in the character. People won't be on this book. But they're still on this book, and I think it has more to do with the Kate Bishop side of things being her first cover, and with the Hawkeye show coming. This is now a $40 to $80 book for raw copy. 9.8s are up to $350 to $450, so this has definitely been up. Definitely worth it on the raw side, and maybe even a straight cash on the slab side. So definitely has continued to grow because it's got kind of two factors that are making people want it. So next we have Marvel Chillers #1. This is a cameo appearance of Chthon, or I don't know how you pronounce it, and also the first appearance of the Darkhold. Hit the list because everybody was specking on Chthon being part of the story with WandaVision and all, that he might be the villain because he does play a role in her origin in the comics. So that's where people were coming at this from. But we did find out the Darkhold actually did appear in the series, whereas he did not. Back then, it was going for $35 for raw copies on average. 9.6 went for $285. Now it's a 15 to 50. 9.2s go 175. So this actually did not turn into a trap. It's been pretty steady, been pretty worth it, which is a bit of a surprise to me. I guess it has to do with the Darkhold, but people have continued to stay on this book. So we will see where this goes. But it's interesting that this one has held as well as it did. I really didn't think it would. So next we have Avengers #186, which is the first appearance of Chthon, or Chathon, however you want to pronounce it. This one, raw copies back then were 40 to 65. 9.8 went for 500. Raw copies have actually backed up, $10 to $50 a little bit. They definitely would be in an I'll be back category, which is most of the sales, but I left this as a up and straight cash because 9.8s of this book now go for $1,500. There's been multiple sales. 9.6s have more sales, and they've been going right around the $500 the 9.8 went back then. I have no idea why we're paying $1,500 for the first appearance of this character. Seems like I was shocked when I looked at these prices, but all the slab numbers are up compared to where they were, like across all grades, which there's not a ton of slab copies of this book, but I'm pretty surprised. I mean, it is an older book. 79, but 79 is usually not that hard to get high grade copies, but people are going after this book. And you think about this book going for $1,500 and that first Gambit going for $12. Something Is Killing the Children going for $11 to $13. But people are after this book. So we'll see. To each their own. I would not pay this much for this book, but clearly there are people that will. So next we have Silver Surfer number 3, second week in a row. As we all know, the spec completely around WandaVision was Mephisto. Back then it was hitting records at all grades, 7.5 for 1,600, 9.0 for 37. And as we talked about last week, it had been pretty steady, and that's still the case. I look at these grades, fit right at just under 1,600 for 7.5 most recently. The most recent 9.0, 4,000. Raw copies, 3 to 1,000, depending on condition. So this has been a very steady book over the last 6 months. Obviously, long term, it's a straight cash book. But 6 months, it's been very steady, very worth it. So even on a short term investment, which I don't know why you do that with this particular book, you've done okay. So next we have Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur number 1. First appearance of Moon Girl. And this hit the list because of the voice cast was announced. I didn't actually go back and look up to see who's voicing these characters, but there's an animated show coming. We got voice actors, so that's what caused this book to hit the list. 9.8 jumped up to $350. They're now $4 to $450. Raw copies are $100 to $125. I thought this would be another one being I'll be back because you usually have a pretty good delay between, like, they just announced the voice cast, they got to record it, they got to animate. So I figured there would be a pretty good delay here because the show's not coming just real soon yet. But this one is up, been straight cash. Anything Marvel, I guess, this year has been up. Things have slowed a little bit recently, but not enough to like undo what everything Marvel was doing the first part of the year. All right. 3 books to go. We have X-Men number 221, first appearance of Mr. Sinister. And this hit for something I haven't had a chance to go back and watch yet. And I need to, which is the MODOK series that went on, I think it's on Hulu, that came out, kind of the adult cartoon series. And Mr. Sinister was playing a big part of that, apparently. Raw copies jumped to 50, 9.8s were hitting 470. And this one has continued to go up. Like, it's an X-Men key. So yes, it's went up over the last year. That's just, you could say that for almost any X-Men key, I think. Raw copies are 50 to 125. 9.8s are 475 to 600 now. So not up a ton, but definitely up. Straight cash. Like I said, X-Men keys have been straight cash this whole year. And so not a ton of sign of slowing down compared to like other aspects of the market. Next, we have our Sony Spider-Man, another book on the list for the second week in a row. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 257. First appearance of Ned Leeds as Hobgoblin. We talked about this last week. There was basically the actor was working out, posting on Instagram or Twitter or something, and people jumped on this. He's going to be Hobgoblin. Back then, 25 to 30. I should say this is slightly up from when we talked about last week. Last week we were talking about like a $20 book, 9.8, 200-ish. This week is 25, 30, but it's also opposite lists. Raw copies now are 10 to 40, 9.8. There's only been one recent sale. It was all the way up to 400, so it was up. So basically, I'm going to call this overall, because almost all the sales are raw copies, is being pretty steady, pretty worth it so far. But we'll see if we actually get this. There's a lot that's supposed to be happening in this movie. I'd be very surprised if we get this time. Finally, last book of the week, as we all know, cards became a big thing back in the winter and the spring. People started sending them in record numbers. People started searching for them in record numbers. Like, the bounce back of cards was kind of amazing. And one of those was Marvel cards, including Deadpool cards. So the X-Force #1 with the Deadpool card in the poly bag hit the list back then, because it was going for $30 to $40. Interestingly enough, this one was hard to judge what it's doing right now. You can get them from, most of them are selling for $5 to $20, even with the Deadpool card. Some are going for $50 to $100 with the Deadpool card. And a lot of it has to do with the claim and the condition of the card, but pictures don't necessarily back that up. The people get the people to spend that just in stating it. Some of the ones that looked really good, some of the cards I thought looked maybe the best, were going for some of the lower prices. It was an interesting dynamic there. There's still a lot of sales of these. There's a lot of these out there. So it was kind of hard to judge this. I was very harsh on this back then, because I know there's a ton of these, but people are still going after them at a pretty decent rate. So I went with I'll Be Back. This was the only I'll Be Back I called of the week. You can argue different ways on this, but yeah, because there's some prices that are higher than what it was before, but most prices are lower. So that's where I went with the I'll Be Back. So that was our list this week. Like I said, we had a lot of traps, but we also had some books that continue to do really well, especially if it was Marvel and X-Men. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.